Everyone in the office is scrambling. 2 days before the deadline, coffee cups stacked by the sink, someone just sent a panicked message at midnight, and the group chat is a slow-motion disaster. But there's one person, calm, laptop already closed, actually enjoying their lunch, who finished 3 days ago. You've met this person, or you've lived next to them, or you are that person, quietly baffled by why everyone else seems to need the pressure. And nobody ever asks what's actually happening inside that brain. If that last sentence landed differently for you than it did for everyone else, you already know what this video is about. You've been finishing early your whole life, and people have had opinions about it, called you organized, called you uptight, maybe told you to loosen up, relax, stop being so ahead of things like it was somehow a character flaw. But you've always felt something pulling you toward completion that you couldn't quite name. Today, you're going to name it. Not because you need fixing, but because you deserve to understand yourself as clearly as you understand your own schedule. Here's where the science gets interesting, and it's going to explain a lot about you. In 2019, researchers studying task completion behavior found something that most productivity gurus completely miss. People who consistently finish work early don't simply have better time management skills. They have a fundamentally different relationship with uncertainty. That's the real driver. Not discipline, not perfectionism. Uncertainty. What that means in plain language is this. The deadline was never the problem. The open loop was. In psychology, this is called the Zeigarnik Effect. Bluma Zeigarnik discovered in the 1920s that the human brain holds on to unfinished tasks almost twice as powerfully as completed ones. Your mind is essentially a stage manager who cannot leave the building until every actor is off the stage. For most people, the noise of an incomplete task is background static, something they've learned to tune out. For you, it's a siren, a constant low-frequency signal that only goes quiet when the work is done. You finish early because you know the only way to turn off the alarm is to actually complete the thing. Not plan to complete it, not almost complete it, actually finish it. There's a second concept at work here, and this one might surprise you. It's called future self-continuity, a psychological framework describing how clearly and emotionally a person identifies with the version of themselves that exists tomorrow, next month, next year. Research from UCLA found that people with high future self-continuity make dramatically different decisions than people with low continuity. They don't just live for the moment, they're already emotionally standing in the future looking back at today's choices. For early finishers, leaving work undone doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels like a quiet betrayal, not of a deadline, of the version of you who has to deal with tomorrow. Think of it this way. Most people treat a deadline like a finish line, something you sprint toward at the last second, adrenaline doing the work. Early finishers treat a deadline like a cliff edge. The goal is distance, not because they're afraid, because they understand geometry. Hit subscribe if you've ever been called too organized, like that's supposed to be an insult. Now, here's the reframe society doesn't give you. The word perfectionist gets thrown at people like you constantly. So does control freak. The word intense follows you around like a shadow. But those labels are other people's translations of something they don't have words for. You're not finishing early because you're rigid. You're finishing early because your brain is honest with the real cost of chaos. You feel the weight of unfinished things at a frequency most people can't detect, not because you're wound too tight, because you're wired to care about what comes next. That's not anxiety, that's foresight. You don't procrastinate because you take your own future seriously. That's not a quirk, that's a form of self-respect most people haven't found yet. Now, let's be honest, because this is where the credibility lives. Not every early finisher is operating from a place of peace. Sometimes finishing early is driven by fear rather than clarity. The fear that if you don't do it now, everything will fall apart. The fear that rest isn't something you're allowed to feel until every task is closed. There's a real difference between finishing early because you trust yourself with the extra space and finishing early because stillness itself feels like a threat. One is strength. The other is survival wearing the mask of productivity. If you finish a project early and feel genuine relief, that's health. If you finish and immediately scan the room for the next incomplete thing because empty space makes you uneasy, that's worth sitting with honestly. The behavior looks the same from the outside. The experience inside is completely different. But for most people who live this way, the root isn't fear. It's something quieter and more structural. It's the way their nervous system processes open loops. It's the way their brain already lives 5 days ahead. It's the way rest only registers as real when the work behind them is actually finished, not just almost finished, actually finished. That's not a disorder. That's a cognitive style, a legitimate, well-documented, psychologically coherent way of moving through the world. You don't make lists because some self-help article told you to. You make lists because the list inside your head never stops running on its own, and writing it down is just mercy. You've probably frustrated people who work right up to the wire. You've probably been misread as anxious when you were actually just prepared. You've probably spent years quietly confused about why other people seem comfortable sitting in the middle of an unfinished thing, like the mess doesn't register the same way. It doesn't register the same way. For them, you're not experiencing a heightened response. You're experiencing the accurate one. You just feel what's actually there, the cost of the undone, the weight of the open, the quiet drain of the incomplete. You feel it, so you close it. That's not a flaw in the architecture. That's the architecture working exactly as designed. The world has 100 names for what you do. Disciplined, type A, overachiever, none of them quite fit because none of them explain the internal experience. Psychology gets closer. Future self-continuity, Zeigarnik sensitivity, low tolerance for cognitive load, high completion drive. But even those are just labels pointing at something that was always already yours. You've been this way before you knew the words for it. You finished your homework the day it was assigned. You packed for trips 3 days early. You sent the email before you had to. Not because someone made you, because waiting felt wrong in a way you couldn't explain and didn't need to. Now you can explain it, but you didn't need the explanation to live it well. Tell me in the comments, are you someone who always finishes before the deadline, or do you work best with the pressure of the last possible second? There's no wrong answer. Both camps have their psychology, and if you want to understand how your daily habits are quietly rewiring your brain in ways most people never notice, the next video on PsychoLogic is going to make a lot of things click into place. Watch it, you'll see what I mean.